Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the instructional video on absolute value inequalities. Very similar to absolute value equations, absolute value inequalities will always have two solutions. You're going to find yourself working with one of two different kinds of problems. You'll be working with less than or equal to, and greater than or equal to. This instructional video will walk you through the differences between these two different kinds of absolute value inequalities. The first kind of absolute value inequality that we need to talk about is the less than or equal to. This is going to result in an and compound inequality or compound solution. So what you're going to have to remember is when looking at the absolute value inequality, when the absolute value symbol is by itself, you need to look at the symbol. In this case, it's less than. So this is going to result in an and compound inequality. Something cheesy that I often think of when I'm trying to remember if it's an and compound inequality or an or compound inequality is I always think that less than kind of sounds like less and. Cheesy, I know, I warned you. So that's one thing that I use to help me remember the difference between and or. Alright, take a moment to grab your notebook and pencil and jot down this first example. Pause the instructional video and press play when you're ready. Alright, this first example has the absolute value symbol isolated. So there's nothing happening outside the absolute value signs. So I can look at the inequality symbol and it's less than, just like we just talked about. So that means my answer is going to result in an and compound inequality. All right, let's go ahead and start solving this. Now, I'm going to start very similar to how I solve with an absolute value equation. I'm going to write two inequalities. So x plus 6 is less than 8. And then I'm going to write a big and here to help me remember that this is going to be an and compound inequality when I'm done. Now, just like an equation, I'm going to write the same part that's inside the absolute value, and then I need to put in -8 here. So just like an equation, I would have the positive value and then the negative value. Now, something to remember that when I switch the sign here, see how I added that negative? That's similar to dividing by -1. So when I do that with inequalities, I have to also flip the absolute value, the inequality symbol. That's supposed to be a greater than. All right, now what I want you to do is go ahead and solve these two inequalities and press play when you've got your two solutions. All right, here are my two solutions. After subtracting 6 on both sides, so here and here and over here, I got x is less than 2 and x is greater than -14. Now, what I need to do with an and compound inequality is I always need to write it in compact form. So that means I need to squish my answers back together. Now, it's standard form or standard practice when working with and compound inequalities is that I write the smaller number on the left. So here I've got -14. I'm going to go ahead and write that on the left. So -14 is on the left. That's going to be less than x. So if I go over here and look at my inequality, it's reversed. Both my x and my -14 are reversed. So I reverse my sign. All right, I'm going to keep writing. X is less than 2. So my final answer, and I will have to create a graph in just a quick second here, but my final answer is -14 is less than x and x is less than 2. Now what I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to go ahead and, I'm going to need to graph this compound inequality. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create a quick number line here. I usually put 0 on my number line and 2. Okay, and I'm just going to estimate where -14 is, so bear with me here. Now, if you remember from graphing compound inequalities in an earlier section, if there is just the symbol less than without an or equal to, I'm going to leave my circle open. So I'm going to do that for both of them. And shading here is going to occur in the middle. So I need to shade where x is greater than negative 14 and where x is less than 2. That's only the only solutions I have are between negative 14 and 2, but not including either of those two numbers. We just talked about less than or equal to. Now we need to discuss greater than or equal to. These inequalities are going to solve very, very similar than the ones we just did. But what we have to remember here is that greater than or equal to is going to result in an or compound inequality. So I'm going to basically do the same thing. I'm going to make sure my absolute value is isolated. And then I'm going to write two inequalities. One that looks very similar to my original. And the second, I'm going to have to take the opposite of C. And when I do that, I'm also going to have to take the opposite of the inequality sign. Now I had a cheesy way to remember less than or equal to. Here's my cheesy way to remember greater than is an or compound inequality. I always think greater sounds like great or. I know, it's cheesy, I warned you. But that's how we remember which ones are and. Less than sounds like less and greater sounds like great or to me. Alright, just like the last time, go ahead and jot down this compound inequality. Press pause, and when you're ready, press play. Alright, so we've got our first greater than compound or greater absolute value inequality. So we need to go ahead and set this up. So again, just like equations and just like the example I did, I'm basically going to take this inequality and write it without the absolute value symbol. So it looks like that. X minus 9 is greater than 1. And I'm going to put a big or here to remind me that because this is a greater than symbol, it's going to be an or compound inequality. Okay, I'm going to follow suit by writing x minus 9, and then I need to put the opposite of 1, so I'm going to put negative 1. And remember, when I take the opposite of my original number, which was 1, I also have to flip the inequality sign. Alright, so now I'm ready to solve. Press pause, solve the compound inequality, and press play when you're ready to see your answer. Alright, go ahead and double check your work. I got x is greater than 10 or x is less than 8. That's my answer. I cannot write that as in compact form because or compound inequalities don't squish together like an and compound inequality might. And then I went ahead and I graphed it. So I had to show all the values that were greater than 10. So that's this over here, and the values that are greater than 8. I really probably should have said or there. Again, just as a reminder that these are less than and greater than, so I leave these two circles open. It's probably a good idea to exaggerate the circles, so when looking at your work or when your teacher's assessing your work, it's really clear if it's an open or closed circle. Alright, here's our last example. I want you to go ahead, pause the instructional video, jot down this example, and press play when you're ready. Okay, hopefully this example didn't throw you off. I'm not ready to write two separate compound inequalities yet because I have this integer plus 4 on the outside of the absolute value symbol. So the first thing I need to do before I can write two inequalities is get rid of plus 4, and I'm going to do that by subtracting 4 on both sides. So I'm going to get 3x minus 3 in the absolute value symbol is greater than or equal to 6. Now I hope it's clear that because my absolute value symbol is alone on one side of the inequality, now I'm ready to split into two compound inequalities. I'm sorry, I should have said two inequalities. Alright, so the first inequality is going to be 3x minus 3 is greater than or equal to 6. Okay, now I have to decide, is this an and or compound inequality? So I go right here. And I'm looking at this. This is a greater than or greater than or equal to. So great or is an or compound inequality. If it was less than, I would put an and. So I'm going to go ahead and follow suit here. Flip the inequality sign because I'm going to flip 6 and make that -6. All right, just like last time, go ahead, solve this compound inequality, graph it, and press play to check your answer. All right, check your work. If you get a different answer than I do, go back and see where your work doesn't match mine. But my final answer here is x is greater than or equal to 3, or x is less than or equal to -1. So that's the first part of my answer. And then I went ahead and I created my number line because there's many answers to this compound inequality. I want to point out, because these two symbols have a less than, an or equal to after them, notice that my circles are closed, and I shaded everything that's less than or equal to -1 and greater than or equal to 3. All right, ladies and gentlemen, good luck on your homework for tonight.